Welcome to Level with Emily Reese. This is a conversation with composer Ego Plum, who has written music for the Cuphead show, which is the animated series spun off from the 2017 wildly popular game called Cuphead. Ego is no stranger to writing music for animated series. He did the music for Making Fiends way back in the day. He's done music for SpongeBob SquarePants, and he's done music for Jellystone, among other projects. So this is right in his wheelhouse, this Cuphead music. And this is the second time he's been on the show. The very first time I ever spoke with Ego, it was right before the first season came out. And now there are 3 seasons out on Netflix of the Cuphead show, and I cannot recommend them highly enough. The series is great. I mean, I laugh out loud when I watch it. And the music, of course, is absolutely brilliant. It was such a pleasure to talk with Ego about it again. In the series, Ego writes a lot of songs, music with lyrics. And many of those songs have been released on a new album. It's called The Cuphead Show Songs from the Netflix series. And you can find it on Spotify and other streaming services. You can buy it on Amazon. Join us on Discord to talk about this and other episodes. You'll find that link in the show notes. Also, if you can support us on Patreon, that'd be fantastic. You can visit us at patreon.com/level. That link also down below in the show notes, along with a whole gaggle of links to various things, including merchandise and whatever from Level with Emily. All right, here's Ego Plum talking about the Cuphead show.
It's been a wild ride. I mean, it's been one of the most rewarding series that I've ever worked on, and the most difficult. I mean, the most intensive. There's a lot of notes in every episode, and working, trying to maintain strong melodies and make it feel like it's from this particular era. Recording live people remotely. Initially when the show started, before we started, I had this grand vision of getting all these players in a room together, one microphone in the center, like trying to record like an old time jazz group. And then, of course, this little thing called the pandemic began and threw, everything, all these plans out the window. We had to approach recording in all new ways. Players in different places, sending me files, recording it with different types of microphones in different rooms, and taking all this stuff and trying to make it sound like it's all happening in one place. So there was a lot of studio trickery, the magic of Hollywood type stuff to create the illusion of a jazz band when it really was not a band in a room. It was just a bunch of different guys recording in different places,
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing how much that's changed over the last couple of years. And, I feel like before the pandemic, there were people who were set up to do home recording, but few and far between compared to now, right? Where it's just like expected. Yeah.
Right. It was so interesting because I remember Netflix was sending out recording kits to like voice actors, and they were having to set up stuff like in closets, and people didn't really know what to do. And you'd hear dogs barking in the back of a voiceover part. It was really wild. It was so unusual, but we got through it. I mean, a lot of shows have been produced now during that entire pandemic. It's wild. But we're really proud. I mean, looking back now that I've finished, it was intense, but I'm so proud of all the work that I was able to do.
Well, yeah, because when we first chatted, it was almost exactly a year ago. I should have looked up the date because I would be able to know exactly, but it's been like a year. And at the time, one season was about to come out, or the first season was about to come out, and you'd been working on it for like years. So, and it had just been announced that seasons 2 and 3 were ordered or whatever, called up, whatever you TV people say. And so that's a considerably shorter amount of time for you to do 2 seasons than you had to work on the first season, right? So I'm just curious what this last year has been like.
Well, everything was back to back on my end. So if I didn't know when season 1 or 2 started, like it all just kind of flowed as far as post-production. So I didn't really have an idea, like even what episodes were frankly going to be part of a certain season or another. I was just kind of barreling through everything towards the end. It could be daunting when you think of like you see the work, but one trick I learned to get through the work is you take it honestly one day at a time. It's a cliche, but you really just think of it in terms of the episode in front of you. And if that's overwhelming, you think of it as in terms of the cue that you're working on at that moment. All I have to write is 45 seconds. Just focus on these 45 seconds and get through it. It's sort of like the only sort of way to get through this, because it does become overwhelming if you think of the big scheme of things and how much music you're actually composing.
Well, and also how much happens in 45 seconds. Like, being someone who to this day works in live radio, 45 seconds is a damn eternity, right? Like, if you have to talk on the air for 45 seconds, you can say a lot in 45 seconds. And you can do the same with music, right? Because 45 seconds is a whole chase scene with 9,000 things going on.
Absolutely. I think I probably spent a whole day on 45 seconds just trying to compose it and craft it. Yeah, that is wild, but that's the only way to get through it. Like I said, break it into little chunks and work through it that way, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really curious about all these chase scenes. They're just, I mean, it's kind of the bread and butter of animation in a lot of ways, that kind of cartooning. It's like just chase scenes, right? They're so great. And, you know, you're so musically active, obviously, during the chase scenes. And I was just thinking about, like, how much input you're given with regards to posts throughout the chase scene. So let's say let's not say 45, let's say 20 seconds. And are you told, okay, at 8 seconds, they're going to do a high five, and at 15 seconds, they're doing this? Or are you, Ego, watching it and making those decisions?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
At this point, I'm so familiar with the language of animation and cartoons and that type of storytelling that it's sometimes obvious to me, but we always have a proper spotting session, which is when you sit down with the director and you watch the scenes without any music at all. And the director will point out, okay, look, this is when they start running, but there's a shift here because now they're really scared. But then all of a sudden something happens and they get this boost of confidence that they know they're going to get through this thing. So there's like emotional changes in the chase music that have to happen like on a dime. Sometimes, most of the time I could figure that out, but you always need a director to sort of guide you along that path. And so that's what it's about. We sit together and often they have like a temporary piece of music. We call them temp tracks that'll be in place there, like a classic 1930s fast jazz piece that they love. And it'll be a reference for style and feel. It'll sort of explain the type of energy. Maybe it's a kind of more of a fun chase rather than a scary chase, or like it's not life or death. It's just playful. So you get a sense of the flavor and the instrumentation that they like. And that'll be enough to sort of send me on my way. I'll listen to it. I'll listen to a temp track for a few seconds. I don't even need to hear the whole thing. I just need to hear like the first 15 seconds. And then all of a sudden, like, it all kind of just stays in my head, the flavor of it. You know, obviously we're not trying to copy a track. We're trying to just take the essence of it and use that to create something new. In many cases, in several cases, we were inspired by Chris Madigan's music, the composer of the Cuphead game. And I would listen to his tracks and be, okay, I love his music, but I couldn't be precious about it either. I didn't have to recreate his music note for note. I would sort of start with a recreation that was maybe a little bit faithful, but then all of a sudden it goes into new directions and starts doing new things. And I think that was a proper way to sort of take that and pay tribute to Chris's work in the game, but also try and create something new with it.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the way the music operates in the game is so completely different just because of how game music operates. But yeah, the flavor, it feels like Cuphead, right? But it feels like your Cuphead, which I really like. But with regards to those, you know, some of those scenes where you're changing on a dime, one of the ones that really stuck out to me too was this dance-off that Miss Chalice has with the devil toward the end of the third season. And, you know, each time they're trading dance moves, the style changes, right? Because you're either scoring the devil dancing, who everyone hates, or Miss Chalice, who everyone loves. So that was a really fun scene to watch.
Oh my God. Thank you for saying that. That was the most challenging thing in the entire series.
Really?
Was scoring that dance finale that you pointed out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a monster. I don't know how long it is, maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes, but
something.
there was so many moments to hit across that span of time, you know, down to the wink of an eye, to the way a twirl, even all the tap dancing is stuff that I did. You know, I actually took a tap dancing class at one
Right.
point, uh, which was the extent of my music education. So I have a good sense of the patterns and the rhythm. I didn't actually, you know, dance the parts, but I had taps that I recorded, you
Oh,
know,
you did
and
those taps.
yeah, that was yeah. So and then I would sort of
Awesome.
through the magic of editing, sort of manipulate that and go frame by frame and watch where the feet were landing, and then
Amazing.
place every single tap where it was supposed to go. So it
Wow.
maintained the rhythm and
Yep.
also sounded proper. And yeah, it was nuts. That I spent a lot of time just on the tap dancing alone for that sequence. You
That
know,
sequence is amazing. Yeah.
thank you so much. Really,
Yeah.
really proud of that. Yeah,
You should
that
be. I
was
mean,
nuts.
because it's not just the two dancers, right? It's all of these moments where the music will stop and the audience will be like, or something. And so you're
Yeah.
having to like pause the music for a minute. I mean, it was jam packed with musical wonderment. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot, honestly, because uh, I remember just sitting here. Was it? I guess it was earlier this year, working on that for hours and hours and days. I'm thinking, is this going to work? Is this going to pay off? And I'm so glad it did, and I'm glad
Yeah.
you love it, Emily. Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, it's great. And then kind of on the flip side, every once in a while you kind of are just gifted like a musical montage, like when King Dice gets his makeover.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
you're not necessarily scoring right to specific seconds as much as
correct.
just scoring the whole overall
Just a
idea. So
feel,
talk about
just a
that. Yeah.
vibe. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another fun thing to do besides the chases. Doing those montages where you get the freedom and the time to sort of create a mood. Uh, it's very rare in animation because look,
Right.
we are moving from scene to scene. Cues are, you know, 10 seconds long, 20 seconds long. Uh, you're lucky to get like a cue that could go on for more than 40 seconds. And when you do, like in a chase or a montage, you're like, you could almost take a breath and like start creating a mood
Hmm.
piece rather than something that needs to do a million things. Um, and that was interesting because one of my one of the things that I always felt like a little peeve was the songs always sort of cut off because obviously we're trying to tell a story, so the
Yeah.
songs will get interrupted or they have to be short. Um, and I was like, God, I really wish these could be realized as proper songs at some point. And when Netflix came to me about potentially releasing some music, one
Hmm.
of my first ideas was, well, let's start with doing a album of the songs of the Cuphead show. And the thing with these songs is they're all kind of short. And I said to them, I'd like to take these songs and actually complete some of these. In the case of the Devil song, which was in the pilot episode, was interrupted by henchmen. He comes in and he stops him. The devil screams at him. I thought people need to hear the rest of what the song was supposed to be like. Same with King Dice's song and a few others. We had the foresight to record additional verses. I remember saying
Nice.
early on, like let's get Wayne Brady to record a few more lines, and Dave Wasson wrote these great lyrics. We recorded them. We got stuff with the Devil, Luke, and we put out an album. Just I think that just come out last month. The songs of the Cuphead show with
Yeah.
extended versions that nobody has heard, additional lyrics that maybe tell a little more story. You get a little more insight into the characters. And yeah, I think fan response has been great. I think people really enjoyed hearing these extended versions of the songs.
Yeah, I think the expanded anytime, I mean, people just love the franchise so much, right? They love the
Yeah.
characters and they love the world, and it's just like fun
Hmm.
to find ways to experience it. So, yeah, and the
Right.
album's great. It's on Spotify. Do you know, Ego, is there a place for people to buy it?
Not yet. So this
Okay.
is what we're going to call, I would say, the first, official release, and it's a streaming thing.
Mhm.
Um, I can say that we're talking with a company called I Am 8-Bit, which put out the
Oh,
original soundtracks for um,
yeah.
the Cuphead game.
Mhm.
So I don't know how much I could reveal, but I could say that there are plans for more. This
Okay.
is frankly this soundtrack is really the tip of the iceberg in many ways because we haven't put out all the jazz, all the chase music,
Right.
all the montage music, all the incidental background stuff that's in some cases orchestral, just maybe some like amazing mood stuff with organs and stuff that I really love,
Hmm.
and just the funny little jazz pop tunes um, that are scattered throughout the entire series. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking forward to releasing at some point. I think that deserves a life of its own. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to say I can't really say more than that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk, and hopefully this is all going to happen at some point.
Good. Yeah, I like the tease.
Yeah.
I am curious about because so many episodes seem to have music as a kind of a main part of the story, whether it's the dance off that we were talking about or the
Mm.
episode that precedes it, which is Ms. Chalice getting in trouble at the orphanage for dancing so much,
Oh, right.
which
Right.
is great. There are a couple Christmas episodes that have a bunch of songs scattered in
Yes.
them. But also there's like the King Dice episode, of course, has a lot of music in
Mm.
it. And I know you write for, you've worked in animation before, and I'm curious if you find that this kind of secondary focus on music in these Cuphead episodes is kind of unique to Cuphead, that there are so many episodes that have this music component be so front and center.
It feels like it just makes perfect sense in this world, in my
Hmm.
mind, especially if you consider the era that we're referencing, where music played such an important role in animation. At
Yeah.
that time, I mean, you used actual orchestras to record music for animation. That was
Yeah.
studios had that much respect for the medium that they would spend the money to do these sort of things.
Hmm.
And in this day, budgets are tighter. It was a challenge to even get the musicians we were able to get for this show. Um, but it had to happen. We had to have live players. This couldn't
Yeah.
be, electronic stuff or uh, all sample based or whatever. It had to be done the right way. And it's so rare nowadays, too. I remember I worked on a show called Harvey Beaks at Nickelodeon, and that became the first show at proper Nicktoon to use an orchestra ever.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was just a few years back. I mean, I think that should happen all the time. I think, I wish cartoons would include that in budget so that composers could work at that level.
Hmm.
Cartoons deserve it, and the artists deserve it too, and the fans deserve it. They deserve that quality and level of music.
Hmm.
So I'll always advocate for that whenever possible, getting live musicians, real human beings, putting their fingers on things and, you know, blasting air through horns and making
Yeah.
sound for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably my favorite, I'm just pulling up my questions here because I didn't have that done. I love the beginning of Roadkill, which is, it's the fourth episode in
Yeah.
season 3. And it kind of starts with this like solo violin and then this, the one of my favorite parts about the Cuphead sound world in general is the saloony kind of out of tune piano going on, which
Yeah.
definitely kind of harkens back to the era. And
Sure.
the vibes come in and they've got their tremolo cranked all the way, which is also, it's just
Right.
great.
Right.
And then just slowly add in like these, like bassoon and clarinet. It's just great. I loved how that kind of all just trickled in at the opening of that episode.
Thank you so much. Drawing a blank on what you're describing because
Oh, that's
honestly,
okay. Yeah.
I've done so many
I
of these
know. Yeah.
things. At a certain point, I hear the music like today, and I'm like, "Oh, I wrote that."
Yeah.
I it becomes like, wow, I can't even remember anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like just churning this stuff out.
Yeah.
I've talked about this before, maybe with you in our last interview, but the concept of inspiration, you know, um, I learned early on when I was faced with deadlines and the reality of how much output is needed, that you cannot wait for inspiration. There's no, mystical being sending me, the notes. There's no muse. There's just me
Yeah.
sitting down as soon as I wake up at my desk and get some coffee and have some breakfast. As soon as my hands go down, I'm composing. and I have to trust my instincts, trust my gut, and know that I'm making the right choices, because composing really is millions of choices all at once. Every time you pick a note and you pick the next one, imagine if you were to stop and slave over, is that the right note? Like, you just have to know and just believe that it's the right note and plow forward. So yeah, it's and that's not to say that I don't put a lot of care and love into what I do, and I believe it is inspired, but I have to be able to summon that instantly. There's no waiting for it, because this is due on Friday, and there's a multi-million-dollar production that's counting on me turning this in, or I'm probably going to get fired if I tell them, you know what, God didn't speak to me this week.
Yeah.
I've just been sitting here, eating chips. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's just chaos, because Cuphead isn't the only thing you're working on either, right? I mean, you have other projects that you're dialing in on all the time.
Oh, sure. There's always something I'm working on. But yeah, like something like Cuphead for sure demanded all of my attention. It was just so intense, so much music. I have to sort of manage my time. And I do have an assistant that helps me in the studio, maintain schedules and figure out how to get deliverables out, and helps with a bunch of aspects of what I do. But it's like I just basically sit and compose every single day. And I try to find time off, but it's difficult. Like, I just wrote to Nickelodeon this week saying, can I take 3 weeks off in June? And it's like, well, we got this, and we got this Patrick Star thing, and we got this coming up. I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. It's rough, but I honestly, at the same time, I cannot complain one bit. I am doing everything I dreamed of as a young guy wanting to do cartoons. So completely blessed and lucky to be doing this work. I'll never take it for granted, but I could use a break now and again, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a bit last year about, well, I mean, I think it posted earlier in 2022, but whatever. I think this is going to post in 2023, so we'll leave it at last year when we spoke. You had mentioned about, or we talked about just how special cartoon music is, and how special it always has been, and it's much more along the lines of, I think, of like how in opera, comedic opera, especially maybe like Rossini or somebody from that era, where the score really is like funny along with the music, and it's just this, it's so different than, a lot of other TV or picture writing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it true that Rossini was a magician? Did you ever hear that?
I've never heard that. I know he loved to eat, and there are many famous dishes named after him.
Is that
Yeah. He loved to throw big parties and just have all the best food. And so, yeah, there's God. All kinds of dishes named after him. Yeah. But I don't know about the magician thing. That's amazing. I want to know more about that.
Yeah, I was at I was watching a magician perform yesterday, and he brought out what he claimed was Rossini's table and box that he bought in an auction of a trick that he created. And he said, it said Rossini on it. And he said he also wrote music. So I assumed it was the exact same guy.
Right.
But maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know either. I also know he retired when he was like 35 or something like that. He'd made so much money on opera that he quit writing opera altogether when he was in his mid-30s. So maybe he picked up the magical arts after that or something.
It's totally
I don't know.
possible.
It's completely possible.
If I ever retired, if I retired, I think I would dabble in magic and cooking.
Why not? Yeah.
Of course.
It's amazing.
But you're right about what you were saying. Cartoon music is like the last. If you take it on its own, it is like the last of like avant-garde composition. It's so fascinating to hear a cartoon score on its own. The first time I heard Carl Stallings' isolated scores for the Looney Tunes, I mean, it is the weirdest. If you didn't understand the concept of moving pictures attached to this, it was the weirdest music I ever heard in my life. It's just absolutely experimental avant-garde stuff that's going back and forth like nothing you've ever heard. It made such an impression. I think those cassettes, at the time I had it as a cassette, of the Carl Stalling scores from Looney Tunes Golden Age, like was a huge inspiration. Just hearing it like that, it's like, wow, the artistry in this is phenomenal. And I encourage your listeners or watchers to look that up because it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. These songs that you released, I'd love to know a little bit more about them. If you want to just kind of like, do you have favorites? I think the Devil's Song was the first one you wrote, isn't it, for the whole series?
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
these songs were collaborations, mostly with Dave Wasson, who was the guy that created the show, and also
Mm-hmm.
Cosmo, who wrote some of these songs as well. So in general, someone like Cosmo has a lot of musical ability. He would give me a demo, like, here's my idea for the song. I would take it and produce it and bring people in for it. Like I'll call musicians that I like, or I found the singer for the theme song. Like I got this great gal that could do an amazing soulful vocal.
Yeah.
So that was my job, sort of taking these things. Dave would write fantastic lyrics, and sometimes he'll just sing them into his iPhone and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this? This will work." I'm like, "This is great." And my expertise is like I know how the cadence or like the amount of syllables that we need per line and
Mm-hmm.
where it should start rhyming and maybe cut out this word because it's too long. So I'll take that and edit it into something that makes sense musically.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so that was a lot of the process. My favorite songs, I mean, the Devil's Song is so special to me because I feel like that's what got me the
Yeah.
job, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
uh, um, that and now my new favorite is Roll the Dice, the King Dice song, because that was so fun to do. I made that demo early on. I sang the whole thing. One day maybe I'll share a version of me singing it. Not as
Awesome.
good as Wayne Brady, but it's like, I had to sort of get the idea to Wayne, like, this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Um, and, you always feel a little shy and embarrassed because I'm not necessarily the best singer, but I know how to get my ideas across.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that was a blast. And, the thing that one of the things now I'm very proud of on the album is the fact that I put the dance battle in there. I initially did
Yeah.
not want to put it on there, and my assistant Ben convinced me. He
Good.
says you have to put that on there. It's like a great bookend to the whole this first record. And I didn't want to put it on because I thought it's got to be just songs. But
Mm.
I figured in the end, like, this is a taste of what the next album is going to be. These instrumental pieces like that that showcase the jazz from the show. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the idea was to say, like, this is, if you like this music and you like this, we're going to get more of this in the future for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good. I love that. Yeah. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Uh, it, let me see. Let me see where I'm at here in my list. I guess, yeah, talk to me a little bit more kind of about choosing the palette, and has it changed much since that first working on the first season, or are you pretty much kind of sticking to, the same instrument choices more or
No, yeah,
less?
definitely. I think the palette is what puts you in that time and place
Mm-hmm.
as a watcher, as a fan of the show. I think that takes you exactly where you need to be. Um, so we've stuck with the traditional instrumentation that you would hear in the 30s. In my case, things usually start with bass, piano, and drums. I think a lot of times for the jazz pieces, I would write that and perform that first.
Mm.
Once I got that foundation, I would come up with melodies and then assign that to the woodwinds. Start with the baritone sax, tenor sax, alto sax, clarinets, and then to fill it up, give it a little more heft. You got your trombones, uh, trumpets. Always like you have to be careful with the trumpets because they are almost like the same frequency range as a voice. Like Miss Chalice and a trumpet are not much different to me. So you have to give them a place.
Yeah.
Like if there's someone's talking, you cannot have a trumpet playing with that voice. You have to,
Yeah.
almost like in a song where you have call and response, like you have someone singing a line, like da dun dun da dun da dun dun da dun da dun. It's
Yeah.
like you have to trade back and forth because these are like similar frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're scoring, you have to be aware of that stuff. These higher frequency instruments cannot
Mm-hmm.
interfere with dialogue. So maybe you keep it, with something like a clarinet underneath that part. So yeah, that's sort of the main instruments I would use for this stuff. And then I love marimbas. I love xylophones, like with the tremolo thing that you were talking about. That's
Yeah.
such a great sound. That is one of my favorite sounds. And then on occasion, like organs, like for the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the weirdest stuff we did use was like a musical saw. That was fun. I found a
Okay.
player in Greece that did that,
Nice.
and that was a blast. Um, Violin, fiddles. Um, that
You would think with a
pretty,
musical saw, not to interrupt you, you think you'd find that player in like the Appalachian Mountains or something, not
right?
Greece, you know? Like I didn't expect you to say I found him in Greece, you know?
I know, I know. It's weird. That maybe was one of the positives of finding people during the pandemic, because I probably would have never did that search. I would have tried
Right?
to find someone
Yeah.
locally. Initially, I
Sure.
was trying to find local musicians to bring into the studio to record.
Mm-hmm.
That was the goal, but it
Yeah.
all changed. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So is this when you do these spotting sessions, is the sound design even in there yet? Or is it just silent video?
no, I think sometimes there's like a temp uh, sound
Okay.
design stuff for a few key moments. Uh, Maybe there's like temp music on a few places. Oh, there's definitely a lot of temp tracks of music, and I think there may be sound effects, but I I probably mute them if they're there, because
Okay.
it's I'm trying to work without like referencing or being distracted by those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I try to create musical versions of sound design, and then
Yeah.
it's up to the directors to decide, like, well, we have a actual real impact of a slap, or Ego's interpretation of a slap through a drum cymbal and a snare. And then
Yeah.
they'll decide, like, what's more fun, what's a more interesting or funny way to do this gag. Maybe it's all only the music, or maybe it's just this, or maybe it's a little bit of both. And those are decisions that happen in the mix house for sure.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I provide all these elements, and then I let those guys figure out what to do with them.
Yeah. One of my
Yeah.
favorite examples of scored sound design is the game BioShock Infinite. I talk about this all the time on this show.
Hmm.
People are probably like, "Good Lord," but every time you got a headshot, there was a string hit, a stinger of string, like a
Oh,
string chord,
wow.
and I thought that was so
Yeah.
cool.
That's great.
Instead of just some other kind of stinger. I don't know. Yeah, because that music is all a small string ensemble, and so it was just
Hmm.
really effective to have those. So scored sound design is pretty cool sometimes for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I gotta
uh,
check that out. I gotta.
y-
What else?
yeah.
What video game music do you like that you would recommend to me?
Oh,
Because I'm just
I
not
mean,
a big, I'm not much of a gamer, and I understand and respect the medium as, like, this seems like it's the final art form. So I'd love to learn more about it. What do you
there
like?
there's so many. I mean, that's honestly probably one of my favorites is BioShock Infinite. But
Yeah.
then one that came out in 2021 is a game called Unpacking. That's a really fun example of like kind of mixing an older style with more modern style. There's a game that came out earlier in 2022. It's like second quarter of 2022 that was written by a fella in Switzerland, just this young guy who wrote this just amazing. He just got all his friends to come over to his apartment and record cool stuff. And that series is called FAR, F-A-R. And then there's
Yeah.
Changing Tides and Lone Sails. Those games are both great. I mean, I love the scrappy ones, the ones
Yeah.
where you're just kind of piecing things together. But I also love like huge, giant, epic ones too. I don't know. I kind of run the gamut, but there's so many good examples, and especially the games that use music as their main deal. But yeah, I mean, I could
Yeah.
give you a list sometime. Send you
That's
some
great. Yeah.
videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't played games since, my original Nintendo. And
You played Animal Crossing during
yes,
the
that's
pandemic,
true.
you
You're
said.
right.
Yeah.
That got me through the pandemic. So that was me coming back into video games. I got two games.
Yeah.
I got that and the Untitled Goose Game, and I would just
Oh,
sit there
that's
with
a good
those
one.
two.
Yeah.
But as far as
Yeah.
video game music, like Koji
Hmm.
Kondo, the guy that did all the classic Nintendo stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's just fantastic.
It's
All the
so good.
Mario music, the Zelda
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
Um, the his approach to ragtime is just brilliant, and I honestly feel like if he was around in the 20s, like he would be like the level of Scott Joplin, because those ragtime pieces that he's written for the Mario games are just phenomenal.
It's amazing. It's amazing,
Yeah.
Reg. Yeah, that's it's a lovely world of music that I think people are too quick to dismiss sometimes. But
Right.
you know, it is. They probably do that with cartoon music too, to be honest. Yeah. Well, what more do you want to say about, you know, what you're working on?
See.
What are you working on right now?
I got
That's
some interesting
not
stuff coming
Cuphead.
up.
Yeah.
Let me see how much I could say about this. One of my next projects is going to bring me into the world of superheroes,
Okay.
and I won't say Marvel or DC at this point, or
Yeah.
who or what,
Yeah.
but I guess that's all I can say for now. So it's
Okay.
exciting. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's we'll talk about it in next year probably.
Good.
You know, we'll get
Yeah.
together again and talk about that. That should be a lot of fun. Uh, and I'm trying to compile, like I said, the Cuphead music. There's so much stuff
Yep.
I'm to sift through and organize and complete. And what I mean by that is, again, I'm dealing with all these tiny little
Yeah.
jazz cues that kind of end right here, and I really want them to be like this. You know, a proper 2 or 3 minute jazz pop song is what I want to hear. So the goal is to flesh these out into proper songs, and then we'll talk about getting it out to the world in some form with the
Yeah.
help of I Am 8-Bit, who've done
Yeah.
these amazing releases for a bunch of great games, and beautiful packaging. So we're talking about something grand. And again, I probably can't say more than that without getting in trouble. But let's see
Yeah.
what happens with that. That'll be really exciting.
Yeah.
And a few other fun things in the works. Boy, I'm not allowed to talk. Everything's like they give me these
Yeah.
things to sign and have to be
Yeah.
careful
Yeah.
and can't get people in trouble.
It's
But
it happens every interview I do. It's okay. It's the
there you
way it
go.
goes.
Yeah.
Any personal projects that you're working on? Do you even have time for that, to write some music for the sake of writing music?
My personal goals are to start performing live again.
Nice.
I
Okay.
feel like I've been creating all this music, and I've always been a performer at heart. And I'm trying to figure out a way to somehow combine the world of scoring for cartoons and live performance.
Yeah.
And it has to do with, I have to talk to Netflix. I have to talk to Nickelodeon, figure out a way to formally and properly do a show of stuff that I've written. I've been inspired a lot by seeing what Danny Elfman has done live. It's been tremendous. Like these beautiful retrospectives of his career, performing the music that he's done. And I would love to do something at a smaller scale. Obviously, I'm not at that level, but I think there is an audience for this stuff, this weird cartoon music that I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of my personal goals, to figure out how to get on stage again, doing fun, wacky stuff. That's how I started, frankly.
I was just going to say, that's how you got
Yeah.
Making Fiends. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was making, I made albums of music for non-existent cartoons, and I would play that live with an ensemble. It was just strange little tunes, instrumental tunes. And I got a cartoon job from it. And I sort of want to go full circle back into now performing. I mean, in my mind, it's like performing the music that I've written for SpongeBob, or Making Fiends, or Harvey Beaks, or, Cuphead, all this stuff. Like, maybe there's a way I could get this to happen. So that's
for sure.
one of the big dreams. I'll figure it out at some point.
Yeah, I think you will too, because I feel like even here in Minneapolis, there's a band. Their name is funny. They're the Poor Nobodies, but of course, when you say it, it sounds like the Porno Buddies. But they perform live to silent film, and I know there are other groups around the country and other places that do that, where they'll bring in a live band for silent film, which is really fun. Or, like you were saying, what Danny Elfman will do, or you'll go see a John Williams movie and the symphony will play the score while you're watching the movie or something. The infrastructure is there for you to succeed, I feel. So I feel like you'll be able to find a way to make it happen,
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. I'll try to make it happen.
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted.
If you need an MC, let me know. I'm just kidding.
Thank you. The last thing I want to say, I just heard the news this morning. Angelo Badalamenti, rest in peace, composer, of course, of the David Lynch films.
Yeah,
starting
Twin Peaks
with
and all that too.
Oh yeah, all that
Twin
stuff.
Peaks.
Wonderful composer, super inspirational for me. Hearing those tracks early on, his take on jazz, sort of dark, unsettling version of jazz, really inspired me. It's like, wow, this is just he's creating new worlds and new emotions that I've never felt from jazz music. Just great, and sad to see him go. I wish I could have met him, or just said thank you or something. But love Angelo Badalamenti.
Heard that.
Yeah, but just found out right before our interview.
Oh my goodness! Wow, what an icon! What a legend!
I know.
Left a legacy, that's for sure.
Absolutely, Emily. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me. You got to understand, I sit in my cave working, and it's always like I feel like I have like it's like diarrhea of the mouth as soon as someone wants to talk to me. I'm like so excited to share because I'm quiet most of the time. And finally, someone wants to know what I'm doing. It's like blah 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 blah. So thank you for taking the time and interest to talk about this stuff. It's really fun for me.
It's such a pleasure to get to talk with you again and to experience your music. I just always enjoy every moment of it. So I really am excited for whatever's coming next, as always, Ego.